am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interviewed Dania Buchanan, who is a founding member and current head of SmartVault. In her role, Dania is responsible for overall revenue growth, product management, marketing, strategic partnerships, and customer success. She has more than 30 years of experience in the technology sector, holding leadership positions in both small and venture-backed startups and large public companies. Most recently, Dania was president and CEO for ChatYat, providing instant messaging applications to mobile consumers. In this interview with Dania, we discuss her personal story of growing up as a child of a fallen commander in Vietnam and how it has shaped her career and leadership style along the way. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. Today, I am with Dania Buchanan. She is the head of SmartVault. And Dania, do you want to give us just a little bit of background on yourself before we start?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Amy. It's been a long time. I know we've run into each other at shows, but we haven't. This is super fun.
Yeah.
I am, like Amy said, I'm Dania Buchanan. I look after SmartVault. I am a founding member of the SmartVault team, which I'm proud of. And it's just exciting to be here. Yeah.
Well, great. So what we like to do is just kind of get into your background, know your story, how you even came to be where you are today. But I like to start more in the beginning.
Sure.
Where did you grow up and what was your family background?
Yeah. I'm a Texas girl. I'm a Southern girl. So
Okay.
all that implies, right? And I'm sure, you know, I am I'm the daughter of a Navy pilot who unfortunately lost his life when I was very young at 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he was a commander of a squadron in Vietnam, and a member of his team did not want to fly on a mission. So he took the mission.
Oh,
and,
wow.
You know, I think he demonstrated at that point his leadership commitment. There was a high cost to that. I do not have a unique story. There's lots of children out there that grew up without a mother or father who were called to service.
Right.
My mother, so in the way that he lost his life, which I think is probably, if I have to be honest and, you know, look back at some of the things that make me me, at 29, she's with 2 kids, and the way that he lost his life was during something, you know, I'm going back to Vietnam here, but the Tet Offensive. So he flew January 1st on a mission. He probably shouldn't have been flying, but those were his orders. So long story short, there was not a lot of closure that my mom had at the time. So plane disappears. No one can tell her anything. It's like he vanished, right? So she was frustrated with her government. It, again, sort of long story short, but kind of relevant, of the women in my family that don't seem to do well with playbooks. She packed up and went to Paris and camped outside the North Vietnamese embassy with a question. Oh. She wrote letters after letter, just, I'd like to know where my husband is. I think that's a fair question. Are you holding him or has he been killed? Very fair. So she got a ton of press, you know, grabbed another one of the wives of the pilots that were lost on that aircraft. And man, she's the toughest lady I know. 90 pounds wringing wet, but no playbook for that. So she stood outside the Paris embassy, and it ended up, 3 or 4 days had gone by, and it was the wife of the ambassador that got her the meeting. And I just think that is such a strong and powerful statement that even in the face of that kind of diversity, you have women that
Helping
understand
women.
where she's coming from. So,
Yeah.
like I said, I have Southern roots. My mother's from
So
the
wait,
South.
before you go on, so what did she find out? So when she,
Nothing. Yeah, no, they wouldn't tell. So they agreed to
oh,
meet
so
with
she
her
got
and
in.
basically stonewalled her. So she went 5 years, and it is still, no part of the plane was ever found. He was never found. After 5 years, the war was declared over, and anyone who was missing in action was declared killed in action. And those
That is so hard.
they stayed sealed forever. My brother and I, he was an infant at the time. I was about 2.5, and it's fair. She was so frustrated with our government. It's a fair question, and
Right.
she wasn't alone too. But mostly, the tragedy when military men and women lose their lives is there's an account of it. You watched a plane get blown up. He was in the Navy, so things happened flying off the carriers, and you had an accounting. There was literally no accounting, and so it left her with no closure.
Well, and she doesn't know if he's suffering somewhere or if he's
No,
dead.
it
Like,
just, do I
yeah.
move my life forward? Do I not? I mean, she and my father were friends with the McCains, John McCain and his wife
Yeah.
back in the day. They each had respective friends of theirs whose husband was missing, that 7 years later they got a letter from him, and he had been a prisoner all this time. So it's just very difficult. When I have closure, I'm sad, I go through the stages of grief and I pick myself up and I move my life forward. When I have no closure, I got to pull some strength, man. I got to figure it out.
So this is fascinating.
Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, but with that story, so you're two.
I'm two.
So
Brother's an infant.
Yeah. So number one question that comes to my head is she's going and fighting for this, so she must have had help.
Yeah, we stayed with my grandma. Yeah, her mother. Yeah, and she went over there several times. She was about to move us over there. She was so frustrated with this country. Yeah, she just had it, she felt like she was being lied to. Records were sealed. They were not. They were sealed until the open records went into effect, which was in the last 15 years or so, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah. And you feel like you should be fighting for that person too, not knowing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
what's the right thing to do?
Exactly. And the other, not that everyone is interested in the Dania story, but the other dynamic is the other dynamic is the gentleman so my father was the commander of this unit. He had flown his mission, landed the plane, called my mom. It was New Year's Eve on the 31st. Hi, I'm home. I'll talk to you in the next couple of days. So she wasn't aware that he had gone back up. And so someone in the squadron would not fly the mission. And so at that point, what do? The mission needs to be flown. You're not willing to fly it. He got in the plane and flew it with two other guys. And that gentleman, it was a story that we talked about, just as we all have origin stories, but it was just a constant ask of my mom. It's like, did you ever hear from that guy? Did you ever, certainly he knew what happened, that the plane had gone missing. And,
wow.
He never did reach out all these years. She was so covered on the news. We have scrapbooks of articles. She was from Corpus Christi, Texas, and she had not purposeful, but just in her attempt to try to find some answers, the press got a hold of her and really, so she was well covered. And, he never stepped up and just said,
well, can you even imagine? People are not strong enough people sometimes,
No. Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, you do. You find your strength.
Yeah. So now your mom is frustrated, angry, sad, grieving.
All of it.
How does that affect you growing up?
I think if I look back, which I had to do this morning over coffee when I was looking at your questions.
You're like, oh no, she's going to ask me this.
She's going to ask me some personal stuff here. I think if I look back, so I was, I have two kids and my daughter's 20. So we go through this blessed or cursed, which is a very, I guess, Gen Z question. So whether I was blessed or cursed, but I was part of, so that's my origin story personally. I think growing up, certainly I was inspired by strong women. I was the daughter of a very strong woman who built a life for herself. You know, she fortunately, the military, through the benefits that we did have, I don't think she had to work, but she found something fulfilling in working. She sold commercial real estate. She was a consultant for a while. She loved people. And I think that is certainly, I get a little bit of that from her. When I was 16, 17, Diane Sawyer was my idol. First woman on 60 Minutes. Just, she represented so much of what I was inspired by, storytelling, finding truths, being around people. And for a variety of reasons, I did not follow my dream of going to the University of Texas and their journalism program, even though that's where I applied and was accepted to. But
oh, really?
Yeah.
Why didn't you do it?
As you know, I think there was just some personal calling. I ended up moving to Corpus Christi. My grandmother was not in great health, and I felt kind of a family call at that time. My mom was struggling with some health issues too, and I just thought that it just didn't feel right at the time. I look back, and was that a regret or not? I don't know. I found my calling somewhere else, but I think again, blessed or cursed, right? I was part of three fundamental paradigm shifts, I guess, or evolutions in the professional world, being part of in the early 1990s, my first job was made to order PCs in Austin, Texas, biggest competitor to Dell. I was 23, barely knew what I was doing. And there was no rule book for the amount of productivity software coming out and bundling, and just the rise of personal computing use for something other than business. So that was the first place I cut my teeth.
So was that before college or?
That was after.
After
that
college.
was after. Yeah.
So what did you end up going to school for?
I was an English lit major because I love stories.
Okay.
I had, and I string this guy out when I've told my kids the story a dozen times, but I started out as a lit major because I loved writing and stories, and I love scenes, describing people, describing the environment, what motivates people, what inspires people. Like I'm very drawn to that, and people that create that are amazing. Somewhere along my junior year, a college advisor got a hold of me and it's like, English, so are you going to teach? Like, no, I don't know. Yeah, I thought I was supposed to be in college because I was studying things that I had a passion for and was interested in. And I don't have like my life figured out, if that's what you're asking.
Right.
But he scared me enough, where I switched to business. It took me 2 more years to graduate. I ended up with a degree in marketing that at the time was very advertising and brand oriented. Right now, I think marketing primarily sits in the business school and is very data driven, and all those things that have just come up. But for me, I found a little bit of a home there. Although if I look back over the last 30 years, I could have been an English lit major. I could have been a psychology major and done the same job. But he scared me enough, and I've just been kind of pissed ever since. Well,
it is an intro. I was just listening to, I think it was Tim Ferriss's podcast with Brene Brown, and she had said to her daughter she wasn't allowed to declare a major starting college. Yeah. That the whole point of college is to take anything you ever were interested in and see what hits you. And I think I've got a son just starting college, but he's he went into something he's really, really passionate about since he was a little boy, but most people don't know,
I have a son who did that too. My oldest was from 5 on. He knew he wanted to be a filmmaker, and that's just the thing. And he went to UT Film School, and he's a unicorn. Your son and my son are unicorns.
My son was writing about how to fix the earth in his journal at 5 years old. So now
so he's going to be an earth fixer.
Yeah. So then, they're living their passion, but like you, I got shifted from going into art into accounting, and because it was safer.
Right.
Yeah.
And we were women, right? And it's like, well, shoot, I need to get a job. I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to teach, but can I not get a job with an English degree? No, apparently not back then. So,
well, and I find it interesting just, thinking at that time when you're talking about, seeing your mom, but your example of Diane Sawyer struck me, because when you think about our generation at that time and being shifted into certain careers, it was because women were like, well, how am I going to have a career? What would be a safe career? So if someone told you, well, that's kind of a foofy career, you don't really know what it's going to be.
Sounds good at parties if you're just getting married. It's like the art history degree, right? Like I can talk about a lot of things.
Right.
None of it's useful.
But it is if you're passionate about it. And that's one thing, I've seen over time is if you're really passionate about a subject, you will be successful. You will find a way.
Absolutely.
But I think women at the time were very fearful that there's not a written path for that major, but business has it, or engineering, or certain degrees have it where there's an outcome, versus that I'm not sure if there's an outcome and you're a woman and you need to make it.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that narrative has sort of followed me around. I've got 2 kids. So one that knew, my son knew, he's older. My daughter is a junior in college now in Austin, and she didn't know and still doesn't know. And she's an English major and an art minor. I'm like, please stick with it, because you're going to reimagine. I mean, not that it doesn't matter, but her dad, my husband, is a college professor. So he, better than anyone, is like, everyone who watches this is going to kill me, but your undergrad doesn't matter as much. It really doesn't. You're supposed to figure it out and then go specialize in grad school, right?
Right.
Figure out how to live on your own and go through all of these first. So for your son, just going through it, there's no bigger change in their lives. You're taking everything familiar away from them and sticking them in something unfamiliar, and they're really not emotionally equipped for it. And then hope it works out, and also pick your career. It's too much. I mean, it's too many.
Well, things. And, even within, even with picking a major and graduating with a major, I wouldn't know being a CPA, I'd be doing what I'm doing today. It's being open to all the pivots in your career, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yes.
So and the sort of the no playbook theme, I think I inherited from my mom indirectly, just from observing her trying to figure it out and trying to, not buck the norm, but she's a tough Southern lady too, right?
I'll say,
we just don't say, we don't take a lot of no. But that, so my first job in tech morphed into a second job in tech.
Now, was that in marketing? Is that, okay.
It was in marketing, yeah.
Okay.
I started as a temp in accounting. I moved in with a girlfriend, had my degree, had my resume, and it's January, no one's going to hire anyone right now. So I'm sending it out, and it's so dating myself, but back in the day, you registered to substitute teach, and you went and filled a form out.
Yeah.
And I did that, and you registered with a temp agency, and that's what they were called, Kelly Girls and all of that.
I did the same thing.
The same thing.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I told them, I don't want to teach, I don't want to sub in high school because everybody's taller than me, and I don't want to do that. So they called me for a high school job the same day they called me for a job at CompuAd, which is where I ended up going, which is a big competitor to Dell in Austin at the time. And it was in accounting. I was like, oh, that class did not go well for me. The credit thing, will I be doing accounting or am I just, so I did some temp work. they ended up hiring a VP of marketing. He was building a team. I went and talked to him, and he ended up being like the most awful person I've ever could have written. The Me Too playbook back then, you know, we had to look a certain way and wear skirts all the time. And I mean, I look now and I look at the women that work for me. It's like, oh girl.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. At 23, I was in, full makeup, skirts. We could not wear pants.
Oh yeah.
If you can't figure it out, I'll get another blonde who can. All of those things. And I guess, you know, one analogy would be that back then, there was no helicoptering. You know, we go out of our way to mentor our teams now.
Right.
And I pride myself on trying to do that and being a role model. But that was not, it was not how I was raised. I came from the school of, you got out of the house on Saturday and you came back, your mom's like, bye, I'll see you at 6 because I need some time.
Right.
And same with the job, like go make a trade show. I'm not here to explain what a trade show is. That's your job. And if you can't do it, I'll get someone else who can. So again, there's no playbook, and I believed him that he would find someone else who could. So I figured it out. And that is kind of a theme too. That morphed into a job with another internet build to order PC company, but we went vertical. So it was a startup, and I fell in love with the small company. We sold personal computers to gamers. So that was kind of the closest I got to, we would go on all these college campuses and hold these big gaming things.
Oh, fun.
That is, so the second evolution I was part of that nobody had a rule book for was internet, right? Internet advertising. And I had a call with Mark Cuban at broadcast.com because he was trying to sell internet radio, and I didn't know he was about to be a billionaire. He was just a dude that was trying to help us get our computers into a customer audience that would want to buy them. But that strategy early on with internet advertising, nobody had figured out. I mean, we were doing banners and what was interstitial? That was a thing. That was an advertising thing. Anybody watching this over the age of 45 will chuckle. But that was like no rules, figure it out. And there's a lot at stake to figure those things out because businesses rise or fall off the back of that. And then that morphed into the early, mid 2000s with SaaS and a subscription-based business model specifically for business to business, figuring out a way to engage and a way to be relevant in that space. Those were all examples. And I was part of the beginning of all three of them. So I'll go back to blessed or cursed. I don't know. Timing, I don't know. But obviously, whether I want to admit it or not, something in me likes to figure stuff out and likes to work in a collaborative environment along with other people who like to figure those things out. And I think that is, that's a big reveal. Whether I really saw myself as Diane Sawyer, but what I ended up with was something different. I think it's like, I also saw myself as a ballerina when I was 10. That's what a lot of little girls do that are overly involved with dance, but at
were you a dancer? Did you dance?
That was the thing that I did if I had to pick a thing. Now, of course, kids are totally different. Like my daughter was a dancer too, but her version of it and my version of it are just two completely different. These kids are so immersed in their extracurricular. Like I messed around with theater. I messed around with dance.
Right. You got to do a bunch of
in the
things.
Arts. I was, live theater still makes me cry at the end of every performance. It's just watching people leave it all on the floor for a live audience, and that energy that takes place is intoxicating. I love it. So it's super fun.
So just going from the difference of journalism to what you do now, how do you think you've incorporated, so something that hit my head, you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But with your father missing, I can only imagine as a child, you were creating stories in your head. or
Yeah.
imagining,
And I
like,
was
and
covering up, right? Back then,
mhm,
when you're a kid, all you want to do is fit in. And at
right.
that time, that is the thing that made me different. I didn't realize it was the thing that made me special, because
Hmm.
kids don't want to, they don't look at their differences as being special. And that's
Right.
difficult. They look at them being different. And so I would, and my mom had other relationships. She got married, had a stepfather for a little bit. That didn't work out. They're just, she had her love, is what she'll tell you.
Right.
And, she sought companionship. That's natural, but I don't think anyone could ever replace what she had, and
Right.
she accepts that. Um, I think I had lots of proof. I was at a particular time with women building their careers and being uh, somewhat accepted in the workforce for a specific role. So I had sort of a 1-2, right? Then I had a personal background where I'm sure I needed to prove do some
Hmm.
proving. And I think that dictated some choices in my life. I stayed places longer than I should have
Yeah.
because I feared leaving.
Hmm.
And that is just part of, I think, learning how to advocate for yourself, and learning that big lesson that everyone has to learn at some point in their lives is who you are right now, today, is good enough. And
Right.
that's a big, I think it has been historically more difficult for women to say that, because we've had to try to be someone else. We've tried to be someone's version of who we should be.
Hmm.
And I lived through a lot of that. I can smell it a mile away. I don't live through it anymore, but 25, 30 years ago, those, early 90s, those were some tough, tough. I'm not the only one that went through some tough experiences as a woman, especially a woman in tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what you're saying about just knowing who you are, and I think this can be for men and women, but
Absolutely.
especially from a female perspective, when there wasn't a lot of women to look to,
That's right.
you thought you had to act like a man,
Mm-hmm. That's
you
exactly
know?
right. Yeah.
And so I think today, I speak at a lot of women's events, and a lot of things that come up for women is like, well, he does the same thing and no one says anything to him, but they
That's
say it to
right.
me. And it's like, well, we have to find who we are
That's
and not
right.
model, because it doesn't look the same on a woman as
That's
it
right.
does on a man. And
That's
you have to be honest about, that outside perception. So how have
absolutely.
you, with, being the head of a company and being one of the founders, how have you broken past that and been able to bring who you are authentically into your leadership role?
I think I use my own story as an example. I am very open with, especially women that have ever worked for me in any of, I've been in a leadership position most of my career.
Mm-hmm.
With small team, big team, doesn't matter. The dynamics are slightly different, but the goals are, the culture's the same. Um, I think it is, for me, it became very individual. Like, I had a point in my career where I felt like, or was made to feel like, I didn't know what I was doing, or that I questioned all of
Mm-hmm.
my decisions. And, I think maturity and confidence, and those are
Mm-hmm.
so hard to, they're so individual, I think, or, so tied to the individual. There comes a point where the number twos, right? For every number one, there's usually a strong number two, and those number ones rely on the number twos to make them stronger number ones. But at some point, if you're sitting in a number two position, so you're sitting at a director position reporting to a VP reporting to a C-level, something like that, you're looking around and you're wondering or questioning why you're being questioned so much when you have the answer. And I think that becomes where you're like, that number one, the number one, the C-level, the top guy in business, the big politician, the president, anyone in these senior positions, they're just people. They're no different than you, no different than me. They have an origin story. They made choices in their careers. So I think I'm extremely passionate right now about diversity being the new X factor, because I think the more women in business leadership positions and the more women in political positions will start to change the narrative. Just these norms are so ingrained, right? That, and we've taken a step, we've not taken huge steps. And I really think that not just saying it starts a conversation, and that we're is so involved and down the path with that, but there's got to be more action. And I think that is what I am, the way I am with my teams, because I have a personal story. I broke through some barriers, and I can be a tangible example for anyone in my circle or anyone I have the opportunity to touch with those stories. But for real change, right? It's for however many you and me's there are in the world that made changes and pivoted and found success and owned who we are. There's a lot of people that are struggling with that. And I just think that, that a more diverse platform, a more diverse team makes a better decision, makes a better outcome, and makes it easier for people and businesses specifically to start changing those narratives. I mean, I know you've got, I think BlackRock, has come out with hey, all of our portfolio companies are going to have 2 board members. You've had, I think it was Goldman Sachs, that have come out and said, hey, for us to participate in an IPO, there's got to be one woman on the board. And those are great, strong things to say, but the reality is most companies go public without a woman on the board. So you have a very homogenous board, and you don't have a different personality. And I'm not just talking diversity with men and women, but all representation, right? Everybody feels like they have to see themselves in their leadership. And I think busting through that, including our own board. Our own board is all male right now. So just being fully transparent, right? I am a woman executive at the company running, a growth-oriented, very successful company, but we don't have a woman on our board. And so I'm hoping, I can change that. Same with the political landscape. I think just the more diverse we are and the more people underneath us coming up in these generations see themselves in leaders across the way, then we'll be better for it. And then you'll have real change. You'll have policy change and process change and things that make it easier for people that are struggling to have their breakout moment.
Well, and it's real. I think having a woman leader that's helping others, because I'm on the fence about the quota because I think it can hurt a woman or anyone diverse on the board of being taken seriously because they know they're the quota.
It's the affirmative action of the modern day. Yeah, don't pick me just because you have to have me.
It's too bad. But just like you said, like we have all this unconscious bias where even there's women at leadership positions where then there's not other women. You see that all the time. And it's really, to me, about women helping women. And I think it goes both directions, right? Like there's the women leaders that need to be looking for opportunities and sponsoring women to get into those next roles, but also the women in the organization that are being mentored or at a staff level or at a manager level, supporting the women leaders as well and not taking them down. Because if there's more collaboration amongst that, it will help change the paradigm. But the problem is that a lot of times, because women don't see other women in those leadership roles, or they think there's not another spot, then it becomes an issue just amongst women, and so really changing that perspective and doing that outreach is so important.
I think so
what you're
too.
talking about.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the more women see women, and I want to be fully transparent. I've had so many males supportive of my career too.
Yeah.
So we have to celebrate the men that are supporting the women who are looking for their careers. But I still think that, I mean, I leaned into Sheryl Sandberg's leaning in, and I thought, well, this is what's holding me back. I'm not leaning in enough, but I feel like I'm leaning in as far as I can without falling over. And then I can't remember, was it in like Fortune or Forbes, you know, that like women really can't have it all. I mean, that's at least I felt like I couldn't at the time. I was working at a very, in a senior position, in a VP position for a publicly traded company. And I had 2 kids, young kids. I had to travel all the time. I mean, you're just no different. I'm the same story as a million other women out there, except that we worry about our kids. So we carry all of the motherness with us, and then we try to cover it up, which is unnatural. And then we think we have to do that because we have to be in a job from 8 to 5. When if there's a little more women leadership at the top, bringing that diversity, then you'll have businesses adopt flexible schedules and, you know, in a way that I still want your brain, but I also understand that you have carpool and you can't do anything about it.
And to not judge you that you want a career while you're a mother,
exactly,
you know, I think that's been a hard part. So I want to go back to a leadership lesson of your dad.
Okay.
Of going up in that plane because someone had to.
Yep.
Have you found that lesson ever happen to you in business where you've had to fall on the sword or take on, you know, something because, you know, one of your team members wasn't doing what they needed to do?
Yeah. Yes. And yes, I've done that. And I think it is, that was his job. He was a commander, and it was expected that he get in the plane if one of his men couldn't perform the duties. So military aside, I do think that the lesson I've learned is that I stayed too long in jobs and was asked to do things that I had were counter to what I thought were good for me personally, good for the outcomes we were trying to achieve. And I mean, a tangible example would be a startup I did prior to SmartVault. And we had a CTO at the time. It was a chat app, and it was actually called ChatYat. It was basically text over VoIP before the iPhone came out. So before pre-2010. So he started opening up. So it was great. It was so cool to learn about the mobile industry and the whole ability to chat over voice over IP instead of sending a text and having it go over the text line. And now that seems ridiculous because we've been doing that for 10 years and no one remembers the time when we couldn't, but there was a time that we couldn't do that. So I was the head of that company, and I was responsible for an outcome for our investors and our shareholders, and had a CTO who thought it would be a great idea to open chat rooms and not tell me, which is like, okay, that also used to be a thing, right? Where you could go meet people in chat rooms.
I forgot about that.
That whole thing. Except what you do when you turn that on and you don't monitor it is you have a whole lot of content out there that's not appropriate. Well, my kids were using the platform because they were our target market at 14 and 15 years old. And that day I resigned. You know, like if you don't turn this off, I'm like, I can't do it. And I felt a whole lot of pressure from the board, from the other executives to just, this is going to blow up. This is what's going to monetize. Like he discovered the thing that is going to make this company money. And basically the plea of like, turn your moral compass off. And, you had an emotional reaction, Dania. We understand how you feel and how
And then
about
it's a
we
woman
go
thing, right?
modify it a little. And it's a woman thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
so at that point, I had a choice, right? I knew that if I pulled out, all of our investment would be lost, and most of the shareholders and investors at the time would lose their money. Um, and that's a tough thing. Like, it's not just me at stake, it is other people at stake that I'm responsible for, but I did it anyway, and I turned it off, and I resigned, and everybody lost their money, including the founder of SmartVault, Eric Plasky, who
Yeah.
I lost his money too. He was an investor in that company, and that's how we met. And basically, that's the origin story of how we found each other at SmartVault.
Wow.
We competed each other when he had his enterprise company in Houston, and I worked for a company called NetIQ in Houston. We knew of each other because I was the VP of marketing and he was the CEO of a company called BindView. But he ended up, through a friend, finding out about this, and he became an investor, a substantial investor. So when I called everybody and said, hey, I'm out, I've lost your money and you're not getting your money back, which is a tough call to make to 30 people who've given you a lot of money. That's what he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I understand your reason for doing it. Hey, I started a new thing. Come talk to me about this. What are you going to do next? And it's like, my Catholic guilt. It's like, oh, I lost all your money, but if you want me to meet you for lunch, sure, I'll find out what you got going. and then he started talking to me about SmartVault, saying I'm basically, working on an integration for users of QuickBooks. And I was like, I can't imagine anything worse than that. Like, I don't want to do that. But at the time, but the thing that got me inspired is the SaaS business. And this was back in the beginning of 2008. I mean, apart from Mark Benioff and Salesforce and Omniture, you had big SaaS companies, but it hadn't really dropped down. And just reconnecting to a customer base that goes back to my storytelling years, I guess, talking to people that were running small businesses, which are so much braver than anything I've ever done in my whole career, even though I think I've done some brave things.
Yeah.
This whole country runs on the back of a small business, and the accountants that support them are the fabric, that they lean on, and the pillar they lean on. So you start realizing I'm talking to actual users of technology, not IT people that may or may not buy it because they played golf with someone on a sales guy on a golf course. Mm-hmm. And that connection, to me, I don't think I've ever lost. And as soon as I went to the first Sleater show and talked to some accountants and bookkeepers, I'm like, oh, y'all have me hooked. Like, I want nothing more than to love you up and empower you to be the best you can be. But that's how, so I've lost.
But Eric, so you made that hard decision, but he actually respected you for it.
He did. Yeah. So that is an example of, I got pressure to do what was right for the business against my own moral compass. And I think, and then because I expressed what my moral compass was, I was treated as a woman, not as a leader of a business. And those are defining moments,
Yeah.
Those, defining moment. And I've not worked with any of those investors apart from Eric again. So
yeah, and it's definitely a risk you take, but you can sleep at night. You can feel like, you did the right thing for the, the children or whatever that could have,
Just, I've done the right thing, overall. So I chose a moral standpoint over an outcome that would have made, I certainly had a financial benefit for the company doing well, that I sacrificed for that too. But at some point in your life, when you're faced with that inflection point, that's the test of someone's character too. We see that repeated in the business landscape, in the political landscape. There's lots of chasing the money. And if that is your motivation and you want to do that, then be transparent about it. Great. But that doesn't mean it's my motivation too. So I think that was a big tell.
So your story is fascinating, and I really appreciate you sharing it. And I think
Yeah.
it's important for all of us to kind of figure out that through line of
Yeah.
what's important in our belief systems as a leader, and how we break through when we're not being true to ourselves, and feel better about it. I'd like to end with some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category.
Okay.
So family or friends, money, spiritual or health.
Health.
Okay.
Health slash wellness health kind of.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Let's go with
Things or
that.
actions I don't have that I want.
Things or actions I don't have that I want. I would like more businesses to adopt a wellness platform
Mhm.
that is more comprehensive than what we have today. Um, that is something that I think we owe, as a developed country, that we owe a view on not only health benefits, which pay if you get sick, but a wellness mindset
Mhm.
that support employees, not only in preventative, but support employees' balance and wellness overall.
Yeah.
That would
Okay.
be a big one.
Things or actions that I do have that I want.
I guess I'll keep on that theme. We have an amazingly comprehensive, robust, and what I think is one of the best benefits programs out there for our team. So I have it, and it didn't just drop on me. I fought for it really hard because I don't think there's anything more important than any business realizing that life is going to happen to you at some point. You're going to have a family member that's in trouble that needs you to take care of them. Regardless of your gender, you may welcome a new family member, whether that's through birth or adoption or foster or whatever. And life is going to happen to all of us. And I think we all, whether you're an hourly employee, a professional, whether you work at SmartVault or anywhere else, deserve to have your income protected when life happens to you. And I'm proud of what have been able to do here.
That's awesome. Um, Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want as far as my wellness or health.
I don't have it, and I certainly don't want it, but I would categorize the bias that we can have against mental health and mental fitness.
Mm-hmm.
I've made sure that we don't have it here, and it's something that I wouldn't welcome coming back into any culture I was a part of, regardless of my role in an organization. I think universally across the board, employee assistance programs, again, when life happens, we need to do a better job of putting policy in place to support that
Yeah.
across the board. Yeah, across the board.
And last question, things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
Everything I just described costs businesses like us a whole lot of money.
Right.
So, I mean, just being straight, right? Like
Yeah.
I am fighting for it, but I don't have assistance, right? Because we're not looking at it at a federal level, a state level, to incent me to do that. So if I want to offer what I believe is a fundamental to employees coming to work that are giving you the majority of their time out of their day, I pay for that as a business cost that is
Right.
steep. So that's what I have that I don't want, and I'm just whether we're at a tipping point or not, I think the conversations that have started specifically, from 2016 on, have started conversations that I'm hoping that we can turn into some action. I don't think there's anything more important, than treating people fairly that are giving you so much of their time.
Yeah. Awesome. So just before we close today, is there anything that we haven't covered or some big takeaway you want people to walk away from this conversation with?
Um, You'll have to help me when you listen to this played back. I hope that my story, because I am the gender I am. I have the story I have as a little girl. I have the choices I made entering into my career and my profession, looking back. Um, I hope I've done a good job balancing a diversity message, not just a fill the slot with a woman because she's a woman message. Like I said, I've certainly had a lot of men that have worked for me, that I've worked for or alongside, that have been amazing. And they are amazing men and super, super supportive of diversity. But I do believe kind of my main message is, if we don't start reacting, I do think that diversity is the X factor, right? For businesses that put that into action, they're going to be stronger in the long run. They're going to have a culture that they're proud of, which means they're going to have employees that are bringing their absolute best selves to work to solve hard problems, whatever those problems are. So I think it has a trickle down effect that is hugely impactful. And I think other than that, my story is that I figured out what motivated me, and I figured out what my superpower was pretty early on. And I would, that comes when it comes. You can't just sit down and say, today I'm going to figure out what I'm really good at and what I really love,
Have to be open along the way.
Yeah. Listen to those voices, listen to your experiences, use people around you, get feedback. I think all of that's really important.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Yeah, it was so fun. Thanks, Amy.
And now for our segment called Mindful Moments, where we reflect on this conversation that you just heard with Dania and look at what lessons we can glean out of this. Her story about her father being killed in Vietnam or disappearing in Vietnam is so powerful. And even though he wasn't a part of her life for very long, of how those stories and belief systems that happen along the way when we are children affect us throughout our life and the decisions that we make as well. And the story itself of her father disappearing and the impact that it had on her mother, and her watching her mother go after something, as Dania puts it, without a playbook, but to fight to get answers and to not back down until she was able to get the answers that she needed. And although she may have never gotten what she was seeking, she was able to talk to the people that she wanted to talk to by being persistent. And that kind of persistence and grit is something that you can tell Dania learned over time from watching her mother and seeing her passion to really get to an answer. Now, the second lesson really with her father in leadership of going up in that plane because that pilot wouldn't go up, and knowing that you're the leader, that you're the commander, and someone needs to go up and not give up. And I think it's really important when we think about these leadership lessons and take it into our lives, that no matter if you're a commander in the military or a leader in an organization or a leader in your family, a lot of times we have to make decisions for the better of the whole rather than the better of the individual. And her applying that decision in Chat Yat about when they were going down a path that was going to make them money, but at the end of the day wasn't the right thing for the whole and didn't align with the values that she had to protect children, that having to make a decision like that, and all of us can probably pause and think about those decisions we've had to make in our life, that we know that from a personal perspective, there's so much on the line, or there's people depending on us, and we have to make a decision that might not be popular. And a lot of times in business or as a leader, people don't understand all the extenuating circumstances when we make decisions. And it's hard because you can't go justify those decisions. You have to make the decisions that's right for the whole. And really taking that leadership lesson from her father and applying it in her life and knowing that it's more important that you do right and you do good for the whole. And sometimes you have to sacrifice yourself along the way of, where she was going to lose her job and people were going to lose money. But at the end of the day, they protected people as well. I thought was a very poignant story to apply this into our life. The other thing she talked about was the stories in our lives, we have a choice. And her story is hard. We all have hard backgrounds or things that have happened in our lives that maybe weren't opportune or that we would have wanted. But her saying about being blessed or cursed, I think is all perspective, and it's a mindset of what we want to choose. That we can use these stories in our life that are hard, having a father dying, having a mother going and fighting for that father and having to live with a grandparent rather than your two parents is something that could be something that you feel cursed or used as an example in your life that this is why things go bad for you and so forth, rather than learning from those experiences and designing your life to look at it as a blessing. How can those experiences that we have had that maybe weren't the best experiences in our life, but what can we learn from them? What can we step back and make sure that we take a different path and we break the generational pattern and intentionally make choices about how we want to operate? What is it that we want to put out into the world for good? And make sure along the way that we are aligning with our values and feeling good, not only about ourselves, but feeling fulfilled by the work that we do and the impact that we're making on the people around us. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.